So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is the very last of our 6-session writers track that Twin Cities Con has offered. So I go by Red. I write under the names Jerry Shepard, Maggie McMahon, and Reggie LaBerge. You can find me at redwritesbooks.com. And I'm with a couple of other very prolific gentlemen. I will let you guys introduce yourselves, and please let everybody know where we can find you online.
Okay. My name is Douglas Van Dyke. It's DheALORAL.com.
Hi, I'm Chad Corey. You can find me on the internet at chadcorey.com and also on, Creator Chad and all the socials.
So you're with like the old folks of the writer crowd here. All three of us have been in the industry around or more than 20 years, closing in on 30 years. And if you don't want to date myself here, I don't know what you do. So what we're bringing as a result is we're bringing kind of to you a little bit of a sampling of different ways that the written word can be brought to the world. Obviously, a lot of people, if they start in the storybook realm, they want to write their books. And that's kind of like that first introduction we have to stories when we're younger. But as you start working in that world, you discover that there are a lot of ways that the power of story can be presented to a lot of different markets. And so between the three of us, I think we've touched on a number of those different areas. So one of the first things I want to touch on is let's just talk about the book. So let's talk about the book itself and the different formats that it can be available, both the traditional as well as some of the more unique ways to put the written word in front of people. So Doug, I'll let you start this. What are some of the different ways that you have your books available to the public?
All right. So honestly, most of them do tend to start off as printed. And it can make a difference even how you approach that. If their publisher handles it, or if you're an indie author, knowing how to format it properly, if you're going to get it out there on Amazon, Ingram. And this is what I'm still used to. I like the feel, the smell of paper. A lot of people still do. But the medium's also moved on to other things. There's ebooks, which also might have to be formatted specifically for ebooks, because what's okay on paper might actually glitch if that same file goes over to ebook. So, and there are sites, I use actually Smashwords, that kind of has a template to help with that. There is also audiobooks. And now some authors will do that themselves, but I've noted that with groups like Audible goes through actually a program, ACX, where a narrator and author can get together and work out a deal to do the book. As an author, I know a lot of people have asked, hey, you write your voice on your own characters. But I know there's a lot of technical details too that even my narrators have sometimes got hung up on, had, call a friend. So that's another way to do it.
And if we have time at the end, we've got a little sample of one of your audiobooks, but we'll see how much time we have left after all the Q&A. One of the things on audiobooks before, Chad, you've got some other unique things to share. Well, actually, you might have touched this on your audiobook. So why don't you share like what, other formats in addition to like those basic ones?
Well, besides print, obviously, we have something called a comic book or a graphic novel. And the difference with writing something of this nature is obviously, as you can see, it's a very visual representation. So you're actually having to work hand in glove with a illustrator, usually a team of people. And then what makes this unique in translating it into this medium is I'll start with a script, and usually the script, you think of it like a skeleton, basically. And that breaks down, for example, visual, right? A better example to show you, if it shows you the panels here, you have to break down all the panels, you have to break down what's going on in the panels, because in a book, you're describing the scene basically on the page. This could be something as simple as a guy walks into the room, and you'd like the artist to decide how it's set up, unless you're really specific or you have a different relationship with the artist. You also have to do the dialogue and things of that nature. What makes it unique is that every level of the component of it is you're basically kind of rewriting the work. So I'll come in, I'll write the script, then the illustrator will come in and draw what he interprets I said. Hopefully, usually it matches up most of the time. Sometimes you gotta tweak it some more. And then the inker will come in and go over that and change some more things on top of that. And then you got the colorist adding another level, and then you got the letterer. So it's all kind of more of a collaborative collaborative form of writing, which is kind of different. Some people don't like it. It's more challenging. It's not a place for ego, I guess you could say. But with audio, audio is very different because you have to get people that will write fantasy as well. And like you said, the words, it just seems ingrained in us, I guess, writers, we have these words people can't say. And they're trying to produce it. We don't think about that when we write it. It's like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. All these consonants strung together. But how do you say that? And so then I'll just get questions. I go through recorded books for my audio, and they'll say, well, how do you say this? And I'm like, I don't know sometimes. So I learned to do like an audio reference that for people to actually name, so I know how to say it. And what I'll do is actually have like a program like GarageBand on my computer. I'll just record, this is how you say it. And they usually get pretty close on that most of the time. Is that kind of touching the
Yeah,
ear?
it does. And then one of the other things that I was going to add, and I wasn't sure like where your audiobooks went, but one of the things that's becoming really popular in audiobooks today is the cinematic audio.
Yeah.
And so in addition to having, that's where they have usually multiple readers, or at least 4 is common, to have like a younger and an older male and female identifying voice, and who can do multiple characters perhaps. But so you up to 4 is pretty common, sometimes more, but I can't imagine casting that. And then they'll mix in sound effects, they'll mix in music, they'll mix in, and they'll kind of really start to create the story. And it's kind of neat, because I think it's sort of like kind of come full circle, like the old radio theater.
It's actually a company called, Graphic Audio is a company I think of off the top of my head, and they call it a movie in your mind.
Yeah.
And it is, they do, actually I think they have more than 4 people for theirs. They just have professional actors that bring them in, they have sound effects, music, everything. They've adapted things like, all the old Deadland books, Westerns they've done, romance stuff, horror stuff, just all sorts of things. But yeah, you're actually right, it's another way, it's reaching a new market basically.
It is. Another one is sound booth theater. They do that as well, where it's casted and it's sound effects and whatever format your book is. So we're really still just talking about books. And we're talking about, okay, so you've got your print, you've got your electronic, and you've got your audio formats. And in each of these cases, you're expanding your audience. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I have people that come to my booth all the time who are like, you know, their vision is worse than mine. Trust me, I mean, it's getting harder and harder and harder to read books. And I love print, just like you, Doug. I want a print book, but like, some people really need that electronic version just to be able to see it, and they make the text really big. Other people, you know, they do a lot of driving, and so they're gonna want those audio formats. So that's just one way that's just still the book though. So let's talk about some other ways that we bring our story beyond the book to the audience. So I really want to ask you a little bit, Chad, about your podcast. So like how is your power of story play into your podcast, if at all, and you know, in what way do you bring them?
Well, with this particular chunk thing here, Tralodon is a big fantasy world setting. Originally, I designed it as a transmedia property. So it's a big fancy word, meaning it's created to be transcribed in all different sorts of media: film, television, action figures, t-shirts, breakfast cereal, whatever the case may be. It's set up for that. So that's why I literally have like over 2,000 pages of notes and references and stuff that people are going to even know. How do you say this? What color is that, kind of thing. So with the podcast, it was just taking the extension of the material that was already there. I'm kind of old school in the sense that I don't like charging people like an arm and a leg for stuff. It's like I want them to get some value for their stuff. And so this is another way to kind of give back to people that purchase things. It's kind of like a value added extra features on a DVD, I guess you can say. So if you want to know more about the gods, you want to know more about different elements of the stories. I have a couple podcast series where I talk about behind the scenes stuff. So if you want to know how about writing goes, and just sharing some basic information that might be of relevance or interest to people. I try not to give too many spoilers because I want people to understand, read the book, or you can read it separately, kind of thing, listen to it. But I find that's a great way to connect with people because, like you said, it's keep it short, keep it simple. But I think people today want to have that connectivity to the story without investing a lot of time physically, if that makes sense, kind of have it already done for them. It's kind of another way to get more of the story, because I'm like we talking about, even though we write a lot of books, you still have to write the book in between the book coming out, so there's that period of time, that lull, where people might want to get some more information, and those podcasts provide the opportunity for that. So kind of, like I said, just something I want to do for fun and for value-added thing, but I've enjoyed it since then because I think it's caused me to be a better writer, because I'm always having to think more as I write the script and get things produced, how it ties into the next story.
So I'm totally gonna steal this idea. I need that word again. It's called a
Transmedia property.
transmedia property. That is like really cool. I just host these panels so I can learn, and I'm like, oh, I'm taking notes. What did Chad and Doug have to teach me today? So Doug, how do you use some other media beyond the books to connect with your audience?
So there's a few things I hook with, not just media, but social stuff. I do a lot of social networking, getting stuff out on Facebook, Twitter, announcements when I'm doing stuff. I'm blocked from Instagram.
Oh, what?
Because I tried to sign my company name instead of me, and that was apparently against their terms of service. So there went the email I wanted to attach to that. But so social media is a big one too, so that people can find you. Websites, and actually here's the story. I was at the state fair once, and the parade came through, and there was a parade float with a children's author. She was up there on the, first of all, I thought this is nice. She's at the state fair in the parade. So she's up there waving to everyone. She's got her name in that on the side of the trailer. Now, she doesn't have anyone like running down handing out cards or flyers. I know that'd be expensive, but so if I want to remember her, I got to memorize her name, and I did. But when I went home, I couldn't find her.
Huh.
I couldn't find the website. I couldn't find a mention on Amazon. And I'm like, that was such a good attention getter, but
For what?
didn't follow up on it. You know, I've got nothing from here. So that's websites. That's a big thing too. You know, how's your reader going to connect to you? How are they going to get updates? I started doing newsletters, which I'll still have sign-ups. I'll tell people they can go to my site. I've got a notepad where they can sign up at my table, but I found that to be unreliable. They're, as much as I tell people, write nicely so I can make it out. And I even used to do book giveaways where I'd say, you know, I'll pick 2 people, and so they would fill out a thing. They would have the choice to check whether they wanted to be added to my newsletter or not. And enough did that also helped build up my newsletter. So that was nice also. Going down here, news swaps with other authors. There are sites like BookFunnel and
Hello Books, I think is the other one.
oh, which is
Hello Books, I think is the other one.
oh, I haven't tried that one yet. And BookFunnel and of course I forget the main one I use because BookFunnel was nice, but there was one that was just a little. I'll remember it in like 15 minutes from now. Other media though, it's like I also ended up using a program Lumen 5, which is online, and getting out little video trailers of my books too. Now they've got clips there where you can add your own and you can get music attached to it. So I did do a number of short, like half a minute to a minute long little trailers for my books to get out there too, again, advertise on the social media. I also do things with the presence of the table. If you know, downstairs is Oscar. He does like pirate tales, you know, and Spanish Main. Right now he's with a bunch of other authors, but if you see him by himself at a big table, he has this big setup with a huge old-fashioned Caribbean map and pirate ships on it, and treasure chests with gems, which he will also sell, plastic gems for the kids. But people are drawn to it when they go by.
So those are like some of the great ways then when you have your books, when you have your stories to like get them out. Now let's start also talking about some of the ways that we can transform what is in the stories to another way of reaching an audience. And it could be games, it could be programs, it could be, you know, if you're lucky, it's film. There are all these great things, the big dream of every writer, right? But so like, what have you done? So Chad, I'll let you start. What have you done kind of to go beyond the realm of the pages, whether the pages are read or listened to or on a screen?
It's a good question. I think deep now. Well, I also kind of piggyback when you said I have a website, trowlerton.com. It's another one of the many words that you, retrospect, you want to rename it, but it's a exploratory information about the world setting. But one of the things I learned, what made me a better writer actually, is getting stuff translated in different languages. I made the kind of curious decision back in the day when I was first getting published. I'll start overseas first and then get published in the United States. Kind of the reverse of what you normally do. I wouldn't recommend it. It's not probably the best way to do that. But it got me some good experience. I actually got to be flown overseas to do an event there, which is kind of different. But anyway, just learning how they interpret what you've written in your language, and then seeing where their hang-ups are, what their questions are, how they interpret, how they translate things. If one fun little side note, not really related to this, but the guys that did Pinky and the Brain for the Danish version, they actually narrated the book for the first.
Oh, how fun!
Brain. I couldn't understand them, but it was fun listening to them. Okay, cool. But basically what I'm trying to do now is I got like a role-playing game I'm trying to develop. That's the next step, getting people immersed into that. I'd like to get into film, into animation, particularly different titles. Obviously Squirrels would be a good animation for that. You have to understand the medium, again, getting back to transmedia, because film is a different animal. Books, they are not necessarily interested in the same end product. They're still telling the story, but how do you get to that version is a little bit more twisty-turny than usual. With television, similar kind of thing. With books or with games, I guess you could say, I've been finding that it's, I guess, how do you say it? Maybe you've found this yourself. Some people are more slavishly devoted to obviously trying to, this is the way the book is, it has to be exactly this way. Well, it doesn't always play that way in a game. So you have to work with the limitations of your medium, if that makes sense. I think that not everyone can do that. I mean, it's just a challenging thing, but I think that's kind of what I'm gravitating toward right now. Obviously, I'd like to do more, but probably rambling there, but that's good.
No, not at all. I've been playing a little bit in the game world too. So like, and I think, you talk about the different formats and knowing things. So for me, like the reason that I went to games, so like for my Broken Fault Line series, it's hard sci-fi, it's factional. So there are like 6 factions of people, and I have a freaking amazing artist and designer that I keep on who like does all of my maps for me, who does all of my series symbols, my flags, portraits. So I have like all of this stuff, and the fact that it was created in a very factional way, I was like, oh, you have 6 factions, this is an RPG. Like it's not a far stretch of the imagination for me to go, okay, like here's your rules. And so one of the things that I've done in developing the game piece is I'm just, my market is growing with me. So like when I very first put this out, I was like, do you want a map? Hey, do you want a map? Do you want a free map? I had no idea what we were gonna do with the map. And like little by little, it's developed and developed and developed so that, and then eventually it's gonna be tabletop RPG, hopefully next year. I'm still rocking that, I'm learning that world. But that's what made sense for this. Whereas when I did children's books earlier in my career, doing the live readings, like the old Reading Rainbow style and turning the pages and then having the video, that made sense for that genre. And so I work with some clients who are writing nonfiction or leadership or business. It makes sense for them to have keynote speeches and programs that they're bringing to corporate events. And so I think, for me, I've kind of like said, oh, right, well, what works for what this particular book is.
What doesn't work, don't make t-shirts of your book cover. I've learned that the hard way.
We were just talking about this. Maybe that wasn't you. We were just talking. There was a friend of mine that they do this.
Yeah, I thought that would be really cool, but when the people don't know what the product is, title is, it's like, what? What is this? And that's, unless it's really cool, you're a big name guy or something, whatever, then maybe that's weird. Yeah. Oh, you did that? Yeah.
But that's general. That's just a really great book T-shirt. Yeah. So.
With lightning hand guys, you don't want that. But yeah, that's what I've learned. Unless it's really cool, you got a big following. But yeah, I used to do that for book signings. I'd actually put the shirt on, big printed shirt. It kind of got some mixed results.
Well, I have one friend who does that, but their covers are funny and their titles are funny enough that like when this person's wearing those shirts, people, they look and they laugh and they're like, okay, that's fun.
But it does work. I've had it positive there. when I go to book signings and book events, I take Jones Soda, the Jones Soda stuff to actually let you do your own My Jones thing. I also put the book cover on the Jones Soda and tie it with the color or the flavor. Bookstores enjoy that so much. They really appreciate it, and they remember me now. I got people that know me in different states that say, "You're that guy that brings the soda." I'm like, "Yeah, that's me." It's a good thing. It's a good thing. But they remember you because they pick up, like, "Oh, that's you." They never drink it. Of course.
Yeah.
But it's just like, I remember you, they like want to collect them or something. It's kind of fun. So that's another way you can kind of like merchandise your books and stuff like that.
Have you ever played with merch at all, Doug? Like different things that you have that are what sort of merch?
Aside
things
from
have you played with?
t-shirts with my book cover on.
Aside from the t-shirts.
I've got a map of my world. I saw one other author do it. He had a huge backdrop of his map behind him, and I thought, I need to get that too. And I do have one. If you saw it the first half of Friday, it was hanging behind me, but it does have issues with any little bit of wind going through, and we found out there's a little wind stream going between some of those, so I eventually came down, and I wasn't gonna mess with putting it up. I still have a small one on my desk. People like to come over just to look at the map, and I haven't found a cheap way to sell it and get it in the hands of people, or I would, because a lot of people, they even spend money on the map if they want, because they like it. And since my world was a gaming world before I did that, I'd also have some of my little figurines out. Some of the ones I played, they're now characters in my book. All of that also means, though, sometimes people come to me and go, "Is this a game?" Especially if I go to a gaming convention and I have to disappoint them. I think at some point I'm gonna do that. Maybe like a choose your own adventure book, or more appropriate, I was a big fan of the Lone Wolf books by Joe Deaver. I really like that. So someday, a someday project, I might get into that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to continue on that thread of the games. You and I both kind of played differently in this, Doug. So where I have like a book that's going to a game, you started with a game and went to books. So you already kind of played with the idea of taking a story and presenting it to your audience in a different way. So like tell us a little bit about that process. Do we have any like game masters, dungeon masters, gamers in here? Oh, yeah, nice, about half of us here, so okay. It's not uncommon for game masters you guys are narrating your stories. You're already storytellers, so it's not uncommon to say, how do I take this game and make it into something that's a book that somebody can pick up and read. So tell some of what your process was for moving from campaign to piece of literature.
I have to try to think when I picked it up, because I remember even way back when I was playing Dungeons and Dragons and other games, we had to do some home rule stuff too. I would also be writing, although at the time I was writing more fan fiction. It might be based off of whatever TV series or video game, and I'd write it. And they were shorter stories more for me. They were usually very action oriented. And at some point I really wanted the need to like get to something more. I really wanted to make a full book. And at that point I already had like the world detailed, everything in it. And then it was just trying to come up with something to match it up. And I think a big compelling thing in my trilogy, when I first started doing fantasy books, I had some problems with certain fantasy tropes. Why are there dungeons and ruins all over that have treasure sitting in them? Arms and armor. On Earth it followed a logical progression. In fantasy it's mixed up. And how about when you have a world with multiple gods, why don't they just interfere? Anyone remember the old Clash of the Titans? The scene when Zeus reaches down, just picks Perseus up, sends him on his way. I didn't want any of that. I wanted character oriented. So I ended up coming with this idea, let's say the gods did interfere. There was a gods wars. Shattered stuff, redrew the map, destroyed continents, and they came back and they said, whoa, we need to sign a covenant, be hands off. It led to a world that I felt balanced everything else. Why there's unexplored regions still out there, why there's actually dangerous magic items in places where hopefully people won't find them, and why the gods can influence your heroes, but can't really directly interfere and mess with them.
So you kind of touched on something there that I'm gonna toss a question back to Chad on this. You talked about like, you had all of this world detail, you ended up having maps, and then it shattered the maps when you started to look at some of the other ways of doing this. And I'm sitting here thinking about, especially for your fantastical worlds, but even in like my futuristic sci-fi, there are a lot of elements that make it possible for you to take your story to a different level. So all of the different pieces, what do you think needs to be included in a story, regardless of where that story begins, whether it begins as a game, begins as an oral tale, begins written, what things need to be basically in a story so that it has the ability to be translated to multiple formats and presentation manners? So what do you think, Chad?
Again, I'll go back to what you want to accomplish with it. So if it's a visual thing, you want to make sure it's a strong visual, like a graphic novel would have. For stuff like trollope stuff, fantasy stuff there, you have to have a hook. There has to be a driving component to actually make it want to be something translated. So, for instance, if it has to have a game mechanic, like you said, a very concept like the game. If you want to have the compulsion to want to explore, to do more in that world setting, it has to be very expansive type of feeling to the world setting. If it's a very confined area, it might not really work necessarily for a game. If you want to do more like a audio thing, maybe you want to explore more inner character development stuff, kind of like audio does have some special independent stuff they do that way. It's just, like I said, for me, again, I'm using this as an example because it's my most recent thing as far as transmedia goes, but I've done other things that haven't been published yet that are more, I'll backtrack. Usually when I write something, I try and look at it, how can I be, sound mercenary, but how can I make money off this? Where are the various channels I can generate some income? So I'll say, I can do a comic, I can do a game, I can do a book, I can maybe a movie, maybe acting. So then I'll write in specifics towards that flavor. For instance, I have one study I'm working on now that's based on the Eastern European time period. It's fantasy elements, kind of like He-Man meets Star Wars. And so they have little laser weapons and things. I might give too much away, but basically it's just kind of what was going on with the politics at that time, what was going on with that region, the whole Byzantine Empire, if you know about it, kind of during 1200s or so, it's kind of collapsing. And it's a fantasy setting, so I thought this would be really fun because you want to have a visual representation for that, because it's very graphic, it's very visual, so you want to have a lot of cool things you can see with it, because their architecture is amazing, and then the artwork, and it's just going to be really cool. So that's not really going to gravitate more towards a traditional story and prose. And because it's visual, it makes great action figures, and it could also make a great role-playing game, because you got characters, factions, like you said, different things that tie in very well. Board games could be tied into that as well. Miniature games could tie into that as well. If anything that can have a component where we can interact and play out scenarios, battles, factions, things like that with the story. So again, it comes back to where's the hook? Where's the thing that can kind of pull into it? Because just doing something, I think we've all seen stuff where they tried to merchandise it too much, and there was nothing there to really merchandise. It's just like, here's Game of Thrones breakfast cereal. It's like, well, that's
Who cares?
okay. That's it.
Yeah, like who cares, right?
But if it has a component to it where it makes sense, you use some of the other properties too. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to do like an animated version of it, but they can do little figurines. They can do little like shot glasses or something. So it's kind of like find a little niche, find a way you can kind of tie into it where it makes the most sense.
Yeah, definitely. So I actually have, I like to write short stories. I've confessed to completely squirreling all the time in my writing career. It's like I can't control myself. I'm like, I'm supposed to be writing this now, but I'm writing this other stuff. And I have some of these short stories that have no purpose. They have no purpose whatsoever. And I was looking at these and like, they're based on like they're kind of like fables, but they're kind of based on like these ancient knowledge, and they're really short, and it's like, who wants to read that? Nobody cares. This is the kind of stuff that you do. So thank you. I'll make sure you get my website. So, but what I had to do is I thought about it, and I'm like, but the people who read those stories, they liked them, but I was like, what the heck do I do with this thing? So I actually turned them into greeting books instead of greeting cards. And so I have I'm like, okay, how can I change this just a little bit? So I put like the to from thing in the beginning, and I put there's like a journal page at the end where somebody could write a nice note, and I sell them with like envelopes and gold seals. And all of a sudden they were moving, and so I was like, okay, you gotta look at what you have and what it lends itself to. And I had to stop myself from writing any of the rest of those little short stories though, because it was a lot of work to figure out even like, what do I do with this? And a lot of times when we're writing, we discover that just because we want to tell the story doesn't mean somebody wants to hear it. So do you have anything, Doug, I'll start with you on this one, something that you, just like for the sake of being a creative, being an artist, that you want to make or write or create, but that you're like, you know what, I don't have a purpose for it, I don't have an audience for it. I mean, and not that the purpose can't be to fulfill your own artistic creativity, but.
Actually, I had something close to that I already experienced with this one book. Very early on in my writing, I started writing this book. I had an idea in mind. There's two main characters to it. I was focused on one of those characters, had the story out, I was writing it, and I feel like something's not right here, something's wrong. I am enjoying it, and you do want to write something you enjoy. But I had to take an objective look and go, I don't know that the audience is going to pick up on this. You know, I don't know that I'm really giving them that hook. I'm really giving them that story. And I actually shelved that book for almost 20 years now. It was right near the start of my writing. And then a few years ago, somebody was telling me an idea about books, young ladies not having enough fantasy books for them. And I got into the mind, this one, but what's important is this was one of the characters in the book that I was looking at, but this was not the star. The other character was. And when I started writing this book for this character, I thought, let me do this as a prequel, and things fell into place. It also made me relook at that other book to go, you know what, she's got a much better story than he did. And then it came together. Then I had something that not only did I feel good about, I can present this, but I felt it's going to be good for the audience too. It's a much better story. So eventually, yes, that was a project I picked up, and now it's going off to the editor again, but I had to be willing to look at something and go, this is not right, and then figure out what I need to do with it.
So do you have any of those, Chad, that either a story that didn't go where you wanted it to go and you paused it, or a story that, like with Doug's, where he had to rest it and then flip it and change what it was going to be?
Yes and no, but I get to your earlier question. I find myself, I think a lot of people here do too, I have to watch myself because you're actually creative. You watch a movie and you start rewriting the movie, and you're like, what am I doing? And then, or I'll watch something recently. You start, eventually you don't catch yourself. You're writing a whole book based on this premise of, oh, I'll see a game or a video. Like, I could do this, I could do that, and I'm remaking the whole game. I'm like, no, I can't. I don't want to do that. I'm focused on this. So that's a lot of stuff that I struggle with. Like, I'll see a comic, I'll say, I could just change that. And no, not good. So as a writer, we're always writing. As creative people, you're always creating. So it's just a challenge. Like I said, I don't often watch a lot of movies now just because of that factor. It's like, oh, I know it's going to happen because you're already figuring out the plot and everything. You're like, okay, that's going to happen. But yeah, as far as writing goes, yeah, I've set some things down. I'm trying to think now what they've been. It's been such a while. Like Doug was saying, if it's not making sense to you, if you're a creative person, if you have just something inside you saying, no, this isn't clicking, this isn't right, listen to that, set it down, take a look at it. One example for me, this was early on for myself too, because a lot of times we don't know our voice yet, whatever that means, right? Because it sounds so professional. I have no voice. It's like when they ask you, who do you write like? I write like me. I don't know, who everyone else is. But basically, I had this story in mind. I thought, okay, this is the general chunk of it, and I realized about halfway through, about 3/4 way through, I said, no, this just isn't working right. And I started pulling stuff out of it. And eventually I found out I actually had like 3 or 4 different series of books in this one series. I said, oh, that's why it doesn't make sense, because it's too much stuff I was trying to cram into this thing. So it's just a matter of learning how to pace yourself, I guess, and learning how not to say, stop from recreating everything around you. So
I had one that it went out. So I've had a lot of seasons of my career. So the second one in this series was my 108th book. So, but of that, they're like all over the map. So I had like a sports writing season, and I had a nonfiction season, and I had, a kids season, and just recently into genre fiction. When I was in my early co-writing phase, when I was doing a lot of biography, I mean, there's some stuff that I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want anybody to know that I wrote this. So like those are just like, I don't have they're not in print anymore. I just hope people don't discover them. So like you talk about like not knowing your voice, I was like, ooh, I would not write that today.
Yeah.
But even though it was part of a path, but then there's ones that I very much like, I didn't miswrite it, like things that I wrote well, but when you have a long career, when you're coming up on 3 decades, the sentiments of the world have changed. And my very first chapter book was a Christopher Columbus story. And like, you just don't do Christopher Columbus stories today. So like, I actually, you know, re-released the second in that chapter book series, and it was supposed to be like a whole series, and it was this brother and sister, but really I can't have that book out there. I mean, I really just, it's not a book that is, you know, what we know about Christopher Columbus has changed. And so that's not a book that I want out there anymore. And so in some cases, I mean, you pull something because, not necessarily even because like your writing has changed, but because the world has changed. I mean, you could look back at some of like your favorite classic movies even, and you're like, whoa, that wouldn't fly today. So do you have things that the world has changed around you? And Chad, I'll let you start this time, and then Doug, that you've had to either rethink or rewrite or just plain pull?
Not yet.
Good for you. He was much more progressive and advanced than I was apparently when I got there.
I just tell more of the classic story, I guess,
Yeah.
with good stuff. So it's just more action adventure stuff. So it's kind of, you know, it's always kind of bad guy, good guy, however you want to interpret that, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I didn't really have any challenges. I mean, you can't go wrong with hiking squirrels. So I mean, it's, no one's going to complain about that. They're not wearing pants or something. So I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I mean, I'm still getting more books out there, so maybe in the future there'll be something.
maybe you still have to make your big mistake yet, right?
No, I get famous because all this like. Yeah.
What about you, Deb?
I still feel like some of my writing might be kind of some of mine might be a throwback to the kind of stuff I liked back in the 80s, you know? Not so much Rambo and, you know, Schwarzenegger stuff. Remember I said actually I had a 10th book, my first one? Yeah, I felt like I wrote Rambo, I took that away. But there was like elements of back then, action scenes and all that I liked. I like the fact that even a young adult book would have a part where, I say Old Yeller, Bridge of Terabithia, where the red fern grows. It's like, if you're gonna have a coming of age book, you are going to have a life-changing moment, an uncomfortable moment for the character. And I feel like that hasn't changed, although maybe now some parent might disagree. They're like, you know, what'd you put in there? It's like, nothing other than the fact that this is a growing person and they experience that. And I even talked to, because, you know, I submitted the book to one of my kids' teachers and said, do you think this is, you know, age appropriate? And she said, you know, I think I totally agree with you, because when they hit that age, going through the teen years, they also expect tougher stuff thrown at them. They're ready for it. They want it.
So Bridge to Terabithia, by the way, first book that ever made me cry. That is like, oh, that was a good one. So, so really at the end of the day, we've talked about a lot of different formats of the way that your book can go out, as well as a lot of things that you can do outside of the text of a book. And honestly, I don't, like, our brains as humans are literally biologically designed to connect through story. Like, you have white matter in your brain and gray matter is that connective matter, and when you hear a story, that is that gray matter that is just like lighten up in your brain. So whatever way that you can reach somebody with story, whether it's through your books or it's through the graphic novel or it's through, you know, games or the video and your transmedia content and podcast, I mean, it still is all story, and every new way that you find to put your story out there is going to reach and connect with more people. So with that, I want to open it up to some Q&A. So any questions, any thoughts, comments, concerns, whatever? Yeah, go ahead, Zach.
For your short stories, just put them all in one book, like a poetry book.
Yes, and we actually have, there's going to be an anthology that Nerd Street, who runs Twin Cities Con, it will be coming out next year, and it does have, that one's, it's going to be called Otherworld So keep your eyes out. Next year, you'll have to pick that up, and it will include a lot of the authors that are here at Twin Cities this weekend.
Good luck. My question to you is, how often are you gonna use transmedia now in your daily?
I'm gonna adopt this word. I'm like, this book is meant as transmedia content. See how it also goes into a game. See how it also, no, I love it. I'm all about it. I'm gonna be like tuning into his podcast. Oh, this is like his transmedia podcast.
There you go.
So, any other questions?
I will add, I'm thinking of doing exactly the same thing down the line.
Yeah.
You know, I get the occasional short story, and some point in the future, because some of the ones I, give it to, like, they need it for a certain time before I do something. I think that's the road I'm gonna have to go to also.
Just throw it all in one and hope.
I have a question out there. How many of you guys are actually writers, writer hopeful? Sweet.
Nice.
What kind of stuff do you write?
Screenwriter.
Just like fantasy stuff or genre stuff all over the place?
Dark sci-fi.
Oh.
Okay.
Dark sci-fi.
Dark stuff? Okay.
Dark.
Military sci-fi.
Ooh,
Okay.
very cool. That's
Huge
coming
market
back,
for
yeah, it's
that.
coming back.
Yeah, that's a
Alright.
really big market right
Yeah.
now. Are you familiar with, do you know Craig Martell?
Mhm.
He's an author you should look up. If he's a very, he's both a rising star and an experienced star in military sci-fi. And like Chad was talking about translations earlier, military sci-fi does really big market in some of those foreign markets too.
Yes, very good.
So,
Waiting to see when it comes out too, but I know that Christopher Schmidt's downstairs, his publishing group was collecting some anthologies. One of them is space-based. Some of it is military sci-fi. I know I submitted a story to it. I'm not certain exactly when it's coming out, other than soon.
I
in the
think
next
he
year.
needed the stories by the end of this month, so you might still be able to get in. He was at a couple of the panels this weekend, so.
He's
yeah.
down around table B11, B12, somewhere right about that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I have a question. You mentioned working with an artist on your map. I'm wondering if you guys can talk about the collaborative relationships you develop within like podcast medias, other people you work with, and how do you navigate sharing your creative insight and like adapting theirs into yours? Like how do you do all that?
Can I start on that one?
Yeah,
Can I kick
yeah,
off?
yeah.
Okay, so like I don't have like my picture books here. I have a lot of kids' books that I did for years. And I personally love collaboration. I mean, like, I eat it up. Like, so when I'm working with somebody, and specifically when I've seen with an artist, I give them the words, and I even, we meet, and I give them my ideas. What comes back is almost never what I've described, just because, I'm trying to describe something from here, and that's just not what they do. And every time I'm like, oh my gosh, you did this, and then I'll take it and I'll be like, okay, well then I can tweak this word because of this. And I mean, and I've experienced that feeling across all the different genres in which I've written. But I find that if you honor the collaborators that you're working with and the voice and the artistry that they bring to it, then you can recognize that you're both in it to raise the overall quality, and it can be exciting, and I love it. I flippin' love it. So it's one of my favorite things. So.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, it's actually very fun. I got some world maps as well. I do for these worlds and stuff too, and it is fun to see something that you had in your head kind of become interpreted to something visual like that. I mean, another example, I was at a con last weekend, and the artist, Matt Went, who did the book for Ashgard, he had a buddy do some 3D printing of one of the characters. It kind of surprised me, so he brought it on his table, and it's just like this little, 5-inch figure of a little Viking squirrel, and I said, that is so cool. But it's just fun to see that, like I said, it's lived in your head for so long, and now there it is actually physically in the flesh. For me, I'm doing this now with a new graphic novel that ties into this trilogy. It's a prequel, actually, coming out 2025. So basically, I give them the idea. I'm a little bit different when I do comic books. I don't like to be the dictator, so I don't like to say everything like this is how it looks, this is how it is. 3/4 degrees angle. I give them a lot of freedom, so they can kind of have a lot. They appreciate it. At least they tell me that. But they get into it, and it's just fun to come back and see what they've done with it. We do basically for a graphic novel, kind of backtrack there. We have like a visual character guide sheet for all the characters, make sure everything looks the same. It's a lot easier to do that maybe beforehand, before afterwards, like we drew them on for all the 140 pages. So we get that figured out first, and then we kind of use that for the model for the rest of the book, and it's just been amazing, like you said, to see. You can describe it, he's this tall, whatever, it has this, and it's like, wow, it looks really cool. And actually, a lot of times if they're good, and they're very, I can say humble was the word, willing to work with you, collaborative is a good word, new word today, collaborative. Putting that together, they will complement what you've done, and it's a very fun experience. It's almost like a symphony. They'll bring something to this, and then you're like, wow, and it just jams really, really well. I see that a lot with graphic novels. Obviously, it's a very visual thing, but with maps and things, narration is the same way. I have one guy that did the Shadow Reach, the newest book that came out. I guess he's an actor. I didn't know that until recently, like a TV actor, movie actor, whatever. He has a great voice. I just knew that, but he just. A lot of times when they do audio, like we talked about the words and stuff, they get it wrong. You always got to repronounce and re-record. He got everything right the first time.
Wow.
And this is all gods and stuff, and this is crazy.
Nice.
Who are you, dude? And it just, but he actually liked it. You could tell it. He said, I really enjoyed this book. I want to read some more. But he brought an energy to it. And it was just fun, because he actually inspired me. I was telling someone the other day, I'm listening to it out walking because I had to proof it, and I said, I like this story, and I wrote this thing. This is I don't know what happens next. That's the energy and the joy you get out of the experience and the collaborative side of things. I think it's, as authors, we're very solitary type of beings in general, and it's just fun to interact in a creative level with other people and get to build in the same sandbox, even if it's just for a little bit, if that makes sense. So that's kind of my experience at least.
Yeah.
It's good to do things like this and getting around, like I say, those other writers that you saw, they're not your competition. They can be collaborators with you, they can be partners. Go to convention, who can split a hotel room with me? All those little things. Matt, I will also tell you that a handy program that I use now, I used to use Campaign Cartographer, and someone looked at it and said, it looks a little 8-bit, and then I looked, it's like, it probably was. So then I updated to a program called WonderGraph. What's really nice about it is, aside from doing the whole world, I can focus in on a part of the world, blow it up, and still mess with all the icons and everything. And that's really handy then for the different maps for the different books.
And that actually leads in perfectly to the second part of the question is, what resources and how do you find those people? Like, how do you seek them out? How do you connect?
Conventions.
Yeah. This is actually one of the best ways, is conventions. I would recommend to any author in here, especially if you're an independent author, to look up the organization 20 Books to 50K. The numbers are numbers. 20 Books to 50K on Facebook. I wish this existed my whole career. It's only existed for like 7 years, but it is the largest online organization of independent authors and the largest organization of independent authors in the world. It's about 72,000 strong. And just their guides alone are just like loaded with resources, absolutely loaded. So that's my number one recommendation, because it's going to lead you to like a bazillion other resources from that one resource. What would you be if you have just one to give them? One resource.
Social media, Instagram, or if you're looking for artists.
Social media panels, artists. I know there are websites out there that will do like bookcovercreator.com, where artists will put a cover, and then if you like that cover, you can buy it from them, they'll personalize it. It has the advantage of there's something there. It has the disadvantage of sometimes there's always a little thing wrong with it. That was so close, that was so close.
There's another one, it's called Rockin' Great Covers. You'll have to look it up because I don't remember exactly, but if you look up Rockin' Great Covers, and those are real human artists creating really awesome, great cover
And there
art.
was a cartography website too, I'm drawing a blank, but I think if you search online, you'll find it. Is there?
There's quite a few.
Yeah, it's quite, so they get samples, of course, as well, but you get like a listing of what they can do, what they can't do. It's like, because there's different styles to maps too. There's really like detailed ones, more like cartoony kind of stuff. So that kind of helps narrow that field down too. They usually give prices or show you what they can do or turnaround time, things like that.
So we do have to wrap up, unfortunately. I'll take one last question, but then this is it.
I was wondering, what if you are an artist and an author?
Excellent. First of all, I'm so jealous. I think so. One of the neat things that you can think about is that you can do both, or you could do one. So it's kind of, it's neat that you have that option. You might occasionally choose to be an artist who's collaborating with an author. You might occasionally choose to be an author collaborating with an artist, and you may occasionally choose to do both. I think all that means is that you have more roads available to you than people like me who can't draw her way out of a paper bag. I can't even draw the paper bag.
But yeah, to piggyback on that, I think really it comes down to time management. Because if you're going to be doing everything, then you're literally doing everything. So sometimes I have artist friends that write and do writing and illustration as well, and they'll pick one. So they'll say, well, maybe I'll draw the characters or the elements for the model sheet or whatever, so I can give that to the cover artist or something to use for reference, but I'll focus on the story. Maybe I want to provide the plot or the summary of the story, and someone else will write that, and I'll do more of the artistic stuff, that kind of thing. So picking and choosing what fits better for that story or that, what your time management skills, allow at that time, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree, plus those cover sites we talked about, you could go from the artist perspective as too. Make something that you might be inspired that someone else might use for their book.
Mm-hmm. We have to wrap up. So this has been just like such a great conversation. I have those of you who have joined us for the first time at this session. You get copies of all 6 of the Writer's Track sessions sent to you by video if you scan this and pull in your email, and that email will only be shared with the other authors who've been on this panel. So we're not going to be sending that out to sales lists or anything like that. And then I want to give both of these gentlemen a chance to pitch one of their books. Remember, they are giving up time in the exhibitor hall to be in here. So when you can send the love back to them in the exhibitor hall, that is very much appreciated. My little pitch is that I have an author mentorship program that I have doing next year, going next year. It's January to December, basically a 1-year on-the-job training program to go from hobbyist to career writer so that you can do this full-time. So feel free to grab one of my flyers when you come up to scan that. That's my only little pitch thing. And so, Chad, what do you want to share?
Decisions. Basically, this one here is the box set. The Wizard King trilogy. If you're interested in fantasy, action adventure type of fantasy, things of that nature, get in, get out, get paid. A bunch of mercenaries. It doesn't really work out that way as you're thinking. As you'll find out in this series, it's been a fun. If you like action adventure, you like old school type of just character issues, character flaws are not perfect, that kind of thing. It's just a fun book, and it's a great introduction to the world setting if you like traditional fantasy. And as well, I got some paraphernalia on here you can pick up as well. There's sample chapters. You can scan the back QR code, tells you all the information, reviews, audio samples, all sorts of fun stuff.
He'll take you to all of his transmedia content.
Ooh,
All right. So again, I'm Douglas Van Dyke. I'm down in A16. I guess I'll pitch the book I was already talking about a little bit earlier. So this is one of the books that's a good entry point to my realm. I know I got a few series going on. Ain't more young adult, but it's also just a quick, nice, fast read. So good to see if you like my world or not. Young lady studying magic, wants to learn fire spell. She's a little young, so the guild gives her a little test responsibility helping out the local firefighters, only for her to find out there's another wizard starting most of these fires. So a bit of a mystery to that one. It's actually one of my 2 award-winning books. I still need to get stickers on them. But Apprentice Storm Mage.
Thank you. So thank you guys. Don't forget to scan this if you want this. Help yourself to a flyer and clear out so that they can have their awesome Name That Tune wrestling theme stuff going on here. So
Your QR code disappeared.
I'm sorry?
Your QR code disappeared from the.
There we go.